as I don't do it the Indonesian way. As long as I don't do it the Indonesian way. Makan in Indonesian is to eat. Yeah. Oh, so wait, so macan. Macan with a C, yeah, is tiger, but it's pronounced macan. The C is pronounced different. Stephen. Nice to see you. Sorry, I'm behind. Wrong. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Well, warm welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club. We're just having our speakers take their seats. Contrary to what you see on our program, and this was a fairly hastily organized event, there has been a change of speakers. Unfortunately, Pongtep Kanchana, who was due to speak for the Pheua Thai party, and obviously they are in many ways the most affected aid body from the flight of Yingluck Shinawatra, is unable to speak tonight, and we're very pleased that well, I wouldn't say in his place, but at least we've got a slightly adjusted panel of speakers who I will introduce in just a moment. But before we get on to tonight's program, just to let you know about some of the things coming up in the next few days at the club. Do come if you can to keep up with our documentary season. We're running them at least one documentary a week. They're a very varied and quite unique take on different topics. We've got one next Monday, September the 4th. It's called The Frankenstein Complex. It's actually a documentary about how various fake monsters are made for all those classic horror movies that you probably enjoyed when you were young. It's a very amusing documentary. There's another one the following Monday, September the 11th, in partnership with the US Embassy, called Salam Neighbor, about a couple of Americans who went to live in a massive refugee camp close to the Syrian border with people who'd fled from the Syrian civil war. I mean, these are very, very diverse, these topics, but you simply won't see them anywhere else, so do come if you can. Now, next week, we're trying to organize a program looking at the really very alarming events in Rakhine State and the huge numbers of Rohingyas who are now fleeing violence there. We haven't quite settled the panel of speakers or the day. It'll be either Tuesday or Wednesday next week, but we hope we will be able to get some people who know a great deal about the situation on the ground and about the new insurgent group or militant group that's operating there. But we feel the situation is developing very, very alarmingly. It seems to be building up to what could be a very serious humanitarian situation. So keep a lookout. We'll send out bulletins when we know exactly what the details and dates for that will be. The following week, on the 13th of September, we are having an event here discussing the prospects for a canal, long-standing project across the Kra Isthmus in southern Thailand. It has been somewhat revived recently. It's something the current military government is interested in, although it's a massive project. So that'll be on the 13th of September. On the 20th of September, we have a former president of the club, Ian Williams, a former correspondent here, now based in London, who has written a cracking, rather cynical novel about life in China, political life in China, called Beijing Smog. He spent a lot of time reporting in China. So those are some of the events coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Let's get to tonight's panel. Obviously, we all knew that the verdict awaiting Yingluck Shinawatra last Friday at the Supreme Court was a very important moment in Thailand. I don't think many of us expected the script to turn the way that it did. Yingluck had given every impression that she wanted to stand and fight to the end. She was very defiant. She'd insisted on her innocence. And in the end, we had a few very baffling hours last Friday where we all tried to work out where she was, and it became apparent that she was no longer in Thailand. Of course, there's been a huge amount of speculation about how she got out, one of the most monitored political figures in the country. There's lots of fabulous stories floating around, ranging from being helicoptered out to sneaking out in a casino van across to Pheua Thai. I don't think we can quite imagine Yingluck tramping through the jungle, so it must have been something like that. But beyond that, it's clear it changes the dynamics in Thailand. And we are still under a military government, but electoral politics should return to the country, we think, sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. And when that happens, the constellation of political parties and how they align, well, everybody expects Pheua Thai to be the biggest party, but perhaps that dynamic has changed now. There's no doubt the Pheua Thai party has been shocked, surprised by the departure of Yingluck, and is still taking on board what it means. And there are big questions, obviously, about who's going to lead the party in future, and indeed whether the party will stay together in its current form. So we've got together a great panel of speakers tonight, and we're particularly pleased to welcome Kun Anutin Chanvirakun back to the club, the head of Bumjai Thai party and of the Sino-Thai construction company. Bumjai Thai is probably, under the new electoral system, poised to do particularly well and could become a decisive party if there ends up being a coalition government. We're also very pleased to welcome back Kun Kasit Pirom, a former foreign minister and very distinguished ambassador in his past career. He was a foreign minister for the Democrat government of Abhisit Wejtajiva and is still very involved in Democrat Party politics, but he is speaking for himself tonight. We are also welcoming back Tom Crucipon, a very acerbic political commentator. If you watch Thai television, you could hardly have missed Tom. He's been all over it, and we're all constantly entertained by his backseat Facebook lives that he does from the back of his car. He's a very, very prolific Facebook blogger, but also has very good knowledge of and links to the politics inside the Pheua Thai party and other parties where he's got great political connections and a lot of very sharp observations. And last but not least, Marwan Makan Makar, who's a very veteran journalist here. I hesitate to even guess about how many years you've been here, Marwan, with fantastic contacts, who now writes for the Nikkei Asian Review and has been following particularly closely what's been happening in the Pheua Thai party and the events surrounding the flight of Yingluck Shinawatra. I'm going to ask Kun Kasit to speak first. You can always rely on him to be particularly straightforward but in his comments. And he is a superbly experienced observer of the Thai political scene. To ask Kun Kasit, first of all, how you see the Thai political constellation shaping up once the dust of Yingluck's departure has settled.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I feel like I was in the emergency unit when Jonathan called. I accepted the invitation immediately, I think a few hours ago. But happy to be here. Even if I were not to be on the panel, I would have come just to listen and to participate. How do I look at the future political direction of Thailand? I think that the populism policy measures and the regionalism approach to politics and vote winnings of Kun Thaksin and his legacies will continue to be a very strong factor in Thai political process and in winning the next elections. And I think the very personality of Kun Thaksin still dominates the Thai political scene. And especially the members of the Pheua Thai party still look up to him for leadership. I do not know about the financial side of it, but I think they should be all right. But the problem for the Pheua Thai is about regrouping, to reinvent itself, to restructure and to reorganize itself with a set of leadership and maybe not on a personality basis. I think after Kun Thaksin, it was Kun Somchai, Kun Samak first, Kun Somchai, and then Kun Yingluck. But now to go to that some sort of outstanding personality, either from the experiences point of view or from the, I think, the name of the family surname and so on, would no longer be valid. So it would be incumbent upon Kun Thaksin and his close advisors to come out with a name, not a name, but I think a couple of names to show the strength and the ability to manage the Pheua Thai party forward, and still relying on the populist policy measures, especially the 30 baht medical care, minimum wage of 300 baht, and minimum wage for university graduate of 15,000 baht, or even to attempt again at the commodities intervention, price intervention, in order to raise up, I think, the plight and the quality of life of the farming population. But they will not repeat the mistake of, twice the price of rice of the world price, or to concentrate only on the rice farming population, but to have the comprehensive coverage of all the major commodities or agricultural produce of Thailand. That would be the first point. Second, I am a bit worried as a member of the Democrat Party, but at the same time for the whole political class, in the sense that so far the past 3.5 years of the military ruled, none of the political party has ever attempted to reform itself. And there is a need for a drastic reform of each of the political party, because of the fact that all the political parties or political class has been cornered, pushed into the corner of being a distrustful set of people, corrupted, self-interested, and not at all serving the people. In that sense, they have been cheating democracy and the people as a whole. And so far, none of the political party, including my Democrat Party, has come out to say that we will reform or we will transform our whole political, our setup in order to have a better management, to have a policy offer that would be conducive to the well-being of the people. Maybe Kunadutin, my friend, will say something about his party, whether there is some reform. And then at the same time, for the past 3.5 years, I think the military junta, through their propaganda machine, was able to place all the ills and the failures of Thai political process on the shoulder of the political class, which was not, it was partially true, but not totally true. But they have been successful. And then at the same time, they have been able to provide the stability card to the people and the sense of honesty, or even the very personality of General Prayut, that he is such a, uncle next door. So he's a very likable personality. And these have contributed to the popularity of the military establishment and to the non-urgency of the pressure domestically onto the military junta to return democracy to Thailand. And at the same time, there has not been external pressure forthcoming from the United States in the past 12 months or 10 months of the Trump administration. Although there are words here and there from the State Department, from the Pentagon, from the 7th Fleet, and so on, to General Prayut and his cohort, that he has to move on democracy. But overtly, through Trump's pronouncement of not interested in the colors of the cats, then it gives the sense of confidence and sign and zone of comfort on the part of the military leadership to go on as is and not to rush on to a democratic life in Thailand. And the middle class and the upper class, the tax-paying, income tax-paying populace of Thailand of about 4 to 5 million are quite happy with the military government. They don't want to face the unrest, the conflict, the protests on the streets and so on. So far, so good. The downturn of the international economic performances have not touched the well-being of the middle class and the middle class, so far, so good. And the price of commodities, although not very high, the farming population as a whole can still survive. We still do get income, a lot of income from tourism and so on. And then the military junta was able to propagate that a GDP growth of 2 or 3% is excellent for Thailand, in spite of the fact that the neighboring countries' GDP growth is about 6 or 7%. And somehow the academia, the media, and the masses, and the middle class and so on seems to take to the fact that 3% is good enough for Thailand. If I were to be a professor of economics, I would have failed this 2 or 3% GDP growth. You know, it's underachievement to the highest level. So then one last point. Whatever incoming government in the future, whether a full-fledged civilian democratic one or a mixed military civilian one or simply military dominance, there would not be much of the flexibility in the conduct of the affairs of the state, because many of the activities to be carried out by future governments have already been stipulated in spirit and letters in the present constitution. And with the fact that we have a committee on education reform, on 20-year strategy planning, and 11 committees on socio-economic reform, then it would not allow much of the creativity and initiative and flexibility on the part of the incoming government to have its own policy outlined and to offer quite a drastic manifesto to the people, because they might be accused of deviating or acting in contravention to the spirit and letters of the Constitution. So we will have a situation where everything is more or less guided and dictated by the Constitution, with the military through the upper house behind the scene and controlling the political processes of Thailand. So we will not see much of the democratic blossoming, but like school children that you are being told every day by the class teacher that you have to do this and that and so on, that would have a negative effect on Thailand as a whole in terms of creativity, innovation, and so on, because the society is being a sort of directed as a top-down process in a controlled manner, and stability is the name of the game and not the robust interaction of all the political players and the stakeholders of the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kun Tom, would you? You've been very vocal about what you see as the failings of the Pheua Thai party over the issues of you've been critical anyway. Perhaps you could outline a little bit about you've talked to a lot of people inside Pheua Thai, how you see the state of the party now and what it should have done and what it should do now.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. And first off, thank you very much for such a wonderful crowd this evening. I tried to escape, but Jonathan found me before I left the house, so I had to come. My wife said, be very careful what you say about today. You know, they're actually putting people in jail now. And I said, it's okay.
Doesn't she always say that?
Well, it's okay. All my friends are there now. So it's good, you know, so I can go in and have a nice conversation with a number of people. I feel like the odd man out sitting next to the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Kun Anutin and our great distinguished reporter, but I'll try to do my best. The good and the bad. I think there's two possible scenarios moving forward. Obviously, there's the good scenario and a bad scenario. So which one do you guys want to hear first, the good or the bad? The bad? My, you're negative. Well, the bad, okay. The bad is, I feel that it could be the lull before the storm. You think Hurricane Harvey is tough, wait for Hurricane Thaksin whenever he's ready to leash out. There are concerns. I have concerns. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but certainly I do know the man. I haven't seen him giving up in 12 years. I find it hard to believe he's going to give up now, especially after you attack his sister in a way, attack his family in a way. I'm a little confused on what he has left to lose. I think there's a lull because there's a very special event coming up at the end of October. But then after that, we also have to be very cautious as to whether or not, again, Hurricane Thaksin will come and do a storm in Thailand. And that gives me a little bit of concern. And I hope that I'm wrong on that one. But again, I think that when you punch a man to the ground and you leave him no room to stand in the country, what is he left to do? And the man certainly does like to double down every time he's hit. On the good side, maybe 13 years of being in Dubai and living a pretty good life and understanding now that the populace isn't going to come out on the streets on behalf of him anymore, and that there are no more crazy reds or crazy yellows per se, maybe that will give him some trepidation and saying, I have to move on. That's the good part, I think, if he actually realizes that, and certainly try to work within the system to, at some point, I would imagine, he would hope, if not come back alive to the country, at least be able to come back dead. I think that's the wish of everybody. Nobody wants to die outside your country. And I hope that Thaksin maybe sees it that way and find a way to not come back in a Hurricane Thaksin form, but let things ride it out. As for the future, we had, what, 13 or 14 years, Jonathan, of the Western democracy experiment in Thailand. I think we finally realized it doesn't work. Let's put that one to bed for a while. Even the Democrat Party itself, by its own name, doesn't believe in that kind of democracy, right? So how can that ever go on? From my point of view, why are we so special? Okay, I don't see Western democracy in any of our neighbors. Why are we so special that we think that Western democracy that elected a Donald Trump or a Brexit or a Macron will work here in Thailand? When, to be fair, it doesn't really work there right now. So I think what we've done, or what the Army has done, what the PAD has done, what the Reds has done, what everybody has done is, reminds me of a nice movie that I enjoy, starring Marty McFly, Back to the Future. I think we have gone back to the 1980s. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, by the way, right? Because, as Kun Kasit so kindly said, the general populace here will take a lot, right? As long as they get what they want. And sadly, in most countries, that's economic growth, that's human rights issues, that's personal rights issues. In Thailand, it's, can we just have stability? I'm tired. I'm tired of stepping over people on Ratchaprasong. And if the army provides me that, and if I have to give up my rights to vote for an elected senator, so be it. Singapore doesn't do it, Cambodia doesn't do it, Burma doesn't do it, Vietnam doesn't do it. Well, Indonesia, I think, does it, right, in a weird way, right? So I think in that way, you have to understand, we all want Thailand to be something, right? But the DNA of the country is not that, right? I think we may actually have to reform back rather than reform forward, with the understanding that this country will have a centralized group that will help govern the country. But in that way, it won't go back to the 80s and the fact that the generals will run everything. I think the generals are also very smart, that they don't really know what the hell they're doing. And they need professional managers to come in. But they would also like to work with professional managers who understand that you have to work with me. I try to understand this constitution, and what I see is almost like a Thailand Inc., where now you're going to have a real board of directors with a real chairman of the board, right? And they have set a policy for the next 20 years. Now they're going to go and hire a managing director of the country through, hopefully, an election, right? But then again, if they don't like the managing director that the electorates have voted, then they can vote because they have 250 votes. So they're going to pick somebody good, I hope, to help run the country. And I hope that person is the same one that the people want, okay? But I think that's how you have to understand how we're going to move forward. It is a pipe dream that we all like to believe in, that the army is going away tomorrow. I think they learned the mistakes from the previous coup. Kun Prayut, for all of the negatives or all of the positives, is well liked for the fact that we can't catch him on any corruptions yet. His brother, his family, his friends, I don't know. But him, he's been pretty clean. And if he maintained that, there's only two things Thai people care about at this point. Well, not true, because they care about the Masked Singer and the face too. Okay, I think they care more about that, and that's the problem. Right? There's only two things Thai people care about right now, which is, can you not be corrupted? Or at least if you're corrupted, can you do it a little bit? Or at least can you do it to where we can't catch you? And two, can you please bring stability to the country? Right? I love the fact that on Monday, after Kun Yingluck left, the stock exchange went up 24 points. I'm a little confused. Had way too many shares of SC Asset though. You know, so again, it's people equate, and Kun said it's absolutely right. People equate a 3% growth, magical. A 0.24 bump on the stock, miracle. You know why? Because it's been so bad. The country has just been so bad and so stuck in this quagmire that any light, right? And the army understands that. It doesn't need to feed you a lot. It just needs to feed you a little bit and think that things are moving forward. So I think that's the army strategy. I think they're here for a while. What do I think of the Pheua Thai? Again, you can't say Pheua Thai. You have to say, what's going to happen to Kun Thaksin? What will his decision be? If he decides to continue forward, move on, fight, then yes, he's like Donald Trump. He can shoot somebody on the street and the 35% will always vote for him. Sadly, in Thailand, it's not 35, it's about 65. Will always vote for him. Depends on what he wants to do. I hope he doesn't go medieval on the country. I hope he stays calm. I didn't appreciate the tweet that he made the other day. I wish he would just stay quiet for a while. But then again, that's Thaksin. Right. Probably read a book somewhere, so nice quote. He speaks French. He likes French wine. As you can see on this panel, Kun Kasset is the only, he knows how to live. He has a wine, always has water. This is terrible. We should learn what he does. I think people like my friend to the left here has a real role to play in the future of our country, because again, if you listen to my first point, I think the army will look for people who can professionally run the country. And maybe if the smaller parties can do what the bigger parties cannot. I see situations where there could be defections from the Pheua Thai just for a simple reason. I wouldn't want to be a minister in the next Pheua Thai party. I don't want to go to jail for 48 years. I think the army has done a good job. There's a Thai saying, I don't know how to translate it in English. It's like, เชือดไก่ให้ลิงดูครับท่าน It's an example. เชือดไก่, you kill a chicken to let the monkey see that we will cut your throat. I think Bun Song was in a really bad situation. It was a situation where it was clear. You become a minister in the Pheua Thai administration, we will put you to jail for a very long time. People have got to think that. Whether it's true or not, it's got to be in the back of people's minds, right? Do I want to take a risk within Pheua Thai, or do I want to jump to a new party? So I think these are things that people are selfish, sad to say. And at the end of the day, they have to look at their future too. So that's how I see it moving forward. I'll wait for your questions. May I hand it over, Jonathan?
You may indeed, yes.
A much better looking man than me.
I was going to say, Kunanitin, after I was looking for the good news in there, Tom. Was there
well, the good news is my good news is very simple, right? My good news is we're going to be a nice country with the army running with us for the next 5 or 10 years. We're going to be stable. We're going to grow, and look. We're Thailand. We're sabai. Where do you guys get off thinking we're not a sabai country? We're happy at 3.5% growth. A very powerful gentleman once said to me, I asked him, right, why don't Thai people rise up? And he said, you know, Tom, I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, we all eat. And you mentioned that, right? There is food on the table in this country. And as long as you keep feeding the people, the odds of them rising up are very, very difficult. Again, without a push from Kun Thaksin to push. And that's my positive, Jonathan. Yeah. I don't think, I hope that Kun Thaksin won't push anymore and that he'll just let things go. Again, I'm concerned knowing him personally, but I think if he does that, then the country should be very well. I think we should stop talking about Western-style democracy. I think we should talk about Asian democracy, right? Which is, to be fair, I have the right to sit here today and there's nobody who's going to arrest me when I go outside. Knock on wood. Right? I had the right this morning to get up, go play golf, you know, eat, talk, do my behind-the-scene Facebook. I have rights. I may not have the right to currently pick my prime minister, but then again, how many people actually go out and vote when they do? So those are my good points, Jonathan. Is that now?
All right. Well, from the optimistic scenario, Kunanitin, after Tom's description, which is basically military rule indefinitely, you're a successful businessman. Why would you want to be involved in politics?
Oh, thanks, Jonathan, for not asking me to respond to the first questions because the two gentlemen have talked what I had in mind already. This is a rather simple question for me. I'm not gonna be up here and say, oh, because I feel that I owe this country, I'm grateful to this country, that's why I'm in politics. Why don't I just talk to you frankly that I entered politics because I think I was saturated in my business. I started to become a bit lazy and I need to find a new venture of my life. And I think in those, back in 2004, when I started my first political career, I vowed to myself that the things that I hate before entering politics, I would never do or repeat that things again. So it has been very easy for me once I enrolled myself into political arena and up until today. So I believe that in politics, if you just come in and you just think of it as a part of your duty, is rather than being hired by a board member of a big conglomerate. You are hired also by a shareholders of this country, which are Thai people, and we just perform our jobs as we were given, and it would be easy. The example of people who enter politics and never had any problems in their own authority, at least Kun Kasit never had any problems from him being the Minister of Foreign Affairs for 3.5 years. I myself served under Dr. Thaksin's coalition for 3.5 years as well. My father served under Prime Minister Abhisit for 3.5 years as well. We never had any problem because we never try to design things that benefit ourselves. In politics, in order to stay safe and be able to perform, the hierarchy of importance is very simple. Nation's interest, people, and self. Of course, one will have to always apply self-interest, or else we could not work there efficiently. You have to perform, and that in order to do what? In order to, if you were in the corporate, in order to get raised, in order to get bonus, in order to be promoted, the same, goes to politics. If you perform well, and if you don't have anything to do with, corruption, or if you could prove that your self-interest has been put at the last level, nothing could go wrong from your work. But if you try to reverse, then it could be a big problem. Record shows that people who were trial, people who had been accused, either they escaped trial, but they could never stand firm or stand high or stand tall in the society. You could point fingers to any crooked politicians, even though they were so rich, they were so famous, but at the end everyone would say, he corrupted. And I think that is worse than what Bun Song has served. So don't feel that people who are out of jail could stay happily. So the only thing that in order to answer Jonathan's question is why I'm here, because I get bored of my business, because it's so well in place, and they don't need me. So if I became lazy, I started to come into my office late, I started to leave my office early, that advantage, that privilege could only apply to me, because what if my executives, other executives who are the paid men did the same, then my company would go bust. So I could not stand being a good demonstration, illustration for them anymore. Then I better seek new ventures. Why? Because I think that I have laid a good foundation with the organization that I was once responsible. And once I felt that there was nothing else I could do, then I need to pass it on. Then politics is my new venture. But I just view it as another career of mine. It taught me how to be a second man. It taught me how to behave myself, that now I'm having a boss or many bosses. In my own family business, I'm the boss, and the two rules always apply. The boss never wrong. If he's wrong, go back to rule number 1. So I have been in that situation. But once I entered politics, I was a deputy minister at the beginning. I had Yingluck Shinawatra as my first political boss. Then I had Minister Wattana Meung Suk. When I moved to Department of Ministry of Trade, then I had Kun Pinit Jarusombat. Oh, look at my boss, those three. So, you know who enjoy most? My employees. Because they said, now, once he comes back, he would understand us more. You know, so again, I never came back. Sometimes I have some crazy mindset. That when I was once in the public office, I used to be, I would say, I used to be superior to many others, I would say, civil servants. So I could not make up my mind that I would have to carry a briefcase and going to wait for them for another 2 hours again anymore, like I did in the past. So I just took pride of my privilege and then never went back to normal business. And then decided to carry on with the political career. Then I was always asked, you know, Anutin, I think your life is pretty fulfilled. You have your own enterprise, you have good family, and you live quite happily, seeing you from the Facebook. Why politics? You know? So I said, well, because people always feel that politics is bad. Even sometimes our leader said, those politicians are crooked. Don't call me politician. But I have to say, sorry, sir. A prime minister is a politician. If you went to Singapore and you put on the occupation block in the immigration court, you could not fill in as prime minister as the occupation. Prime minister is title. Minister is title. Director General is title. But your career is, if you are MPs or you are appointed, if you are a member of cabinet, you are nothing else but politician. So if the politicians are painted in a negative aspect, how unlucky we are that we need to have politicians to run our country. So I said, no, I want to be a clean politician. I want to prove to many people that politics is not cruel. Politics doesn't lead you to hell. If, again, you just behave yourself the same way that you are working in your corporate. Just think of it as a profession and work it. Follow the policy. It doesn't make so much difference. And if the Thai people, like Kun Thom mentioned before, sabai, you know, it's not my, in Thai saying, which Excellency I don't really like, is the country doesn't only belong to me. There's always a saying that ประเทศไทยไม่ใช่ของฉันคนเดียว Thailand is not only mine, it's for everyone. Then I take things for granted. This is very selfish statement. And it has become somewhat traditional. We need to change that because we are not standing alone no more. We are in the global commodity. We have competitions. We need to survive competitively. So don't let the real crook take this chance that, you know, all the educated, all the, you know, people who have responsibility, people who want to serve the nation but fear of being called politicians. If you guys said, no, I don't. If you ask anyone, why don't you play politics? I don't want to show my assets. I don't want to, someone to come and look, come after me after I step down. The question is, if you did nothing wrong, why fear? Why wouldn't I dare not showing my assets? If I paid tax, if what I earn could be traced and could be, how you call, and we deserve that. Let's say, how could people blame me if I have dividend of the corporates that I own? And then it was subject to tax. So why fear? Or even though you went into public office and then you said, I don't want something to come after me after my term finish. That means you must have done something wrong. Because if you ever only did things right, welcome all the inspection. It would give you, how you call it, would really it can be called certificate of cleanness, of transparency. So I never fear about this, and the politics has never hurt me. Why? Because I don't put myself on risk. If somebody asks me to do something wrong, if I could not say no, I just disappear. Because the cabinet only met once a week. Once a week, you can always get diarrhea on Tuesday morning. So if you see what Kun Suranan has written, I asked Bun Song why you did this. Amigo, why you did this. If I was Kun Bun Song, I would never reply that I cannot talk. Why don't I say, somebody forced me to do that. And I wanted to be a minister. That's why I stay on. It would be a better, because when you say, the people who did something wrong must always leave some trail. If you say, I cannot say, I take it to the grave. That was, to me, a confession. I don't know whether he spoke it intentionally or he spoke it with sorrow. Yeah. But it was a confession. So to me now, Kun Yingluck, whether she serves or not serves, if she survived the trial, she still has to liable for the civil case. She had to repay about 38 billion baht damage that was caused under the right scheme. 38 billion baht. An individual could never pay. So, and if she could not pay, then she had to be under receivership. And then if after receiving everything, the principal hasn't fulfilled, then she had to be declared bankruptcy. So Thailand should never, circle around of Pheua Thai or, Kun Thaksin, Kun Yingluck, Kun Somchai. We just should only look forward, and whatever it comes, go with it and do it with transparency. It will come one day that things that don't work under the current constitution, let's say you could not do any populist policy at all. If the government could not help people at all, because there would be a Politburo on top of the government. People who owe explanation to the citizens of Thailand are not the government, are not the cabinet members. It's the Politburo thing that need to clarify. How many times they can clarify this? I never fear of this. The rule is there. Don't come out and say the charter is bad, because it has passed the people's, how you call, referendum. And most importantly, His Majesty has already emblem the charter. So for the Thai people, it has to finish and stick with that. Once it's come to practice, there is any loophole or anything, time will call for change automatically. So you have only two choices. If you don't like it, don't spell on it. Leave, not involved, or just go with the rules. So, and then I think Thailand can still go ahead with lessons that has taken place for 15 years now. I don't think Thai people can afford, prolonging this kind of lifestyle any longer. And I think I still have high hope on that. I have nothing to do with Kun Yingluck's verdict. Actually, I feel sorry that people who once served the country had to end up this way. But, nobody in this room can confirm that what has been done during that administration. We just only have to follow the court decision and respect the court results. So it is really not our business to worry about that. What do we have to do to go forward? That's all for now.
Thank you very much, Konaneti. A lot of very diverse insights there, Marwan. Perhaps you can draw everything together as to where we're now sitting after the Yingluck departure.
So one of the delights of being a foreign correspondent covering Thailand is the number of times you have to willingly suspend disbelief to understand the country. I'm an Asian, so I don't look down on Thailand like, say, the Thais accuse foreigners of doing. I try to understand Thailand's natural rhythm and the operating system. But the challenge is, once you've done that research, how do you write the story and how do you tell the world a narrative that they probably might find difficult to comprehend, looking at things from a lens of reason. So for instance, when Yingluck Shinawatra was elected as Prime Minister, I remember covering her campaign, and during her term, until she was thrown out, the government was thrown out, she earned a lot of names. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. In fact, recently somebody referred to her vagina. But I think she has kept the one secret that we did not know, and she kept tightly guarded, was that she's a magician and that she can disappear for a week and see no trail. And those of us who are trying to figure out her disappearing trick had to depend on our sources within the military and the intelligence division and police. And there were many theories that emerged from Saturday onwards. The early ones were that she had traveled to Trat province and crossed over to Cambodia. Then there was another story that she had flown from Thailand to Singapore. We at Nikkei, as a result of our sources, said that she left her house in a van and she crossed over at in Aranyapratet in Sakeo province. But now a week and the government is still struggling to come up with an answer. So when Woodward and Bernstein were investigating Watergate, Deep Throat, they so said, follow the money. I think in this case, it is follow the passport. Because soon after Yingluck disappeared, the Prime Minister said, impound her passport. And we have a foreign minister here who will tell you that what she has done qualifies for her passport to be taken over, impounded. Right? She's broken the law. But from over the last 36 hours, 48 hours, 4 days, the issue of the passport has become an embarrassment for the government. They are soft peddling it. And as I said, we don't know who helped her, except it was clear that there was help. And I think answering the passport question will be the first knot to untie about her disappearance. Looking ahead, I think this case is a huge game changer for Thai politics. And what's going to happen on the 27th when the judges deliver their verdict is not just whether she's innocent or guilty, but also to look at the reasons the judges will use to determine whether she is guilty, because that could affect future government policy making. Yes, the junta has drafted a 20-year grand plan, but in terms of politicians like Kun Anutin, when they campaign in the next election, it is a democratic culture and a right of politicians to promise the electorate policies. And I think the verdict and the judgment will certainly determine what he and his party and the other parties might have to promise the voters on the campaign trail. So this is a game changer in that sense. In terms of accountability, it's also huge, because here you have a case that is essentially criminalizing public policy. And in most democracies, that is decided by the electorate. You elect a government, they introduce a bad policy, you go to an election, you're thrown out. But here, the Thai style of doing it under the military government is to criminalize public policy. And I think that's setting a very dangerous precedent. I mean, the current Prime Minister can take cover under Article 44, but once that doesn't exist, these very laws can come to bite him. And there is no impunity that he could enjoy if Article 44 is not there. So I think this is an issue that the regime should be concerned, and also political parties that are going to campaign. The result of Yingluck fleeing has shifted the winds behind the wings of the junta. The Pheua Thai party is in a bit of a disarray. Yingluck Shinawatra's political capital has been squandered. And, you know, the Shinawatra brand also will suffer. But at the end of the day, whether that is going to change the opinions of the voter will be determined at a future election. And I realized this when I was covering, going into the rural areas of Thailand. There's a Thai word called nakleng. Nakleng means the thug, the strong man, the tough guy. And in the Northeast, you know, they are constantly dealing with a bureaucracy that is not cooperative, or a system that doesn't respond to their needs. And then they have the local tough guy who helps resolve problems for them. That was Thaksin for them. So as long as they are quite happy with this tough guy delivering public goods to improve their quality of life, Yingluck's flight from the court or from Bangkok will ultimately be decided by the electorate and the electors when they vote. So the government, yes, has advantage, but I think it's a short window, and this whole issue of her disappearing trick is going to be a lot of trouble, especially if it enters very politically sensitive territory which we journalists cannot write about. Looking ahead, also keep in mind when Thaksin and his Thai party were turfed out by the 2006 coup, there was nothing called the Red Shirt movement. When the Thai party was disbanded and a new party was formed, the new avatar was People's Power Party, they won convincingly. And what is also interesting was the military government at the time backed another political party to campaign and win the 2007 election. And Korn, former Finance Minister Korn, when he came to the club subsequently, revealed that that political party at the 2007 the elections outspent Thaksin's party 3-1. So this issue of vote buying also is up there for debate. I think the brand is what matters. So in 2008, when you had the People's Power Party in government, you had the yellow shirts, and I think Kun Kasit has fond memories of the 2007 politics on the streets. For the second time, elected government, the pro-Thaksin government was removed from power. And that certainly fueled the energy of the red shirt movement. So what you're seeing or from 2006 till now is politics mutating. And I think it'll be, it's quite possible that in the next year or two, it would mutate into a new direction, which we don't know. And as journalists, that's the exciting part of our job, to be able to tease out the trends, the thinking, where the issues are going. In terms of whether the country needs elections or not, what is very clear is there are some people who enjoy a quality of life for which they don't need elections to enjoy this quality of life. Whereas there are others in the country who have benefited from elections to improve their quality of life. So that is the sort of the fault line that will determine where Thailand is going. But this case, I think, is going to shape a lot of what politicians like Kun Anutin and even Kun Kasit, if he contests with the Democrat Party, will do or will not do. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, now we come to the fun part of the evening. Don't be shy. There's a microphone over there. You can ask questions. I would say to prioritize working journalists, but frankly, anybody who's got a sensible question to ask, keep your questions short, please. I want questions, not statements. And please identify yourself and who you want to answer your question. There are 4 people on the panel, so you may wish to direct them to a particular speaker. Please, yeah.
Ande, I'm a publisher here. I have some problems to understand why Yingluck is accused. She caused a big loss, what you said. But when you look at the EU policy for decades, they gave supports to the farmers, and we had the butter mountain and the milk lake and so on. And then it was stored, it cost money, and then part of it was subsidized and sold much lower price to Russia, for example. So this was not for profit. This was meant as a money transfer to the agriculture sector. And as I understood it, this policy was to give something to the agriculture sector. And so it was never made to make a profit or
Sorry, we just lost your microphone there a moment. Hold on a second. Actually, I think we got the gist anyway of your question. I mean, we don't have any legal experts, I think, on the panel, but I mean, it does raise the very simple question, were the charges against Yingluck Shinawatra fair, given that, I mean, she was accused of negligence for failing, I think, to prevent corruption, but of course, at the point she was charged, nobody had yet been convicted of corruption. Was it a political trial or not? Kun Kasit?
I served in Brussels for 4 years, so I am still quite aware of the workings of the European Union, and especially on the common agricultural policy. But in the European case, there was no attempt or to set the target of siphoning off the public budget to the entourage of Kun Yingluck political setup. It was an attempt or a policy that would be prone with corruption. The money really never gotten to the farmers in full, unlike the European farmers. Money was lost or taken off to the millers, to the middlemen, to the international rice traders, to the cooperatives that did have the connections to the Pheua Thai party. So it was deliberately meant to be a mechanism to cheat the country out of it. It's totally different from a much more transparent setup of the European Union. And I don't think we did come out inside the parliament when we were in the opposition or on the street. Just simply we do not like the face of Kun Yingluck. I know her personally. There is no problem on that one, but I think her policy measures as conducted by her brother were not acceptable. It was detrimental to the country as a whole. And she was warned many times. 2 reports from the anti-corruption bodies of the things going on, 1 report from the Office of the Attorney General, and intensive studies by Thailand Development Research Institute, the World Bank, ADB, our own deliberations and debate in the parliament did warn her from the very beginning that this rice intervention scheme would not work, it would not be beneficial to the farmers, and would be prone with a lot of corruption practices. A lot of rice millers were being set up like an instant coffee Nescafe, just simply to get the money. And the farmers, very few farmers get the full 15,000 baht per ton. Or none would get one, and so on. And you cannot pay 15,000 baht for a different kinds of rice. You know that is uneconomic. And then if you go to Ken Sien or to Adam Smith, Ricardo and so on, it would not be acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel. Tom or Konanitin, do you have any views on whether it was fair or not that she was charged?
She's not charged with corruption. She's charged with a bad policy decision. Let's be honest. Right? Maybe she was corrupted, maybe she was not. Government couldn't charge her with it. She's not out of the country because she was being charged for corruption. She was charged because, as Marwan said, it's a public policy, which sets kind of a weird precedent. Right? I mean, Yingluck is not out of the country because of a rice scheme. Yingluck is out of the country because of a 4 in the morning decision by her government at that time to give amnesty to Kun Thaksin and everybody else. You want to tell a story, you need to go right to the front of the story. I love the Pheua Thai party. They win every election, and they manage to snatch defeat out of every victory because they end up doing stupid things. This was the fundamental issue, right? Was there corruption? If you look at Bun Song, the answer is yes. Yingluck set the policies for it, but the government is basically saying, didn't you know this was a bad policy? Boy, I'll tell you, that's a weird precedent to go into. As you know, Marwan has said, usually when you make a bad policy, the electorate will vote you out. In Thailand, you have people on the streets. You have Suthep Thuk Suban, whose policy of building police stations are still up for grabs whether or not it's not corruption. So I'm not here to defend Yingluck, right? But if people are telling me that this whole case wasn't political, right? You know, I have bridges to sell in New York, if you like to buy a few, if you believe that. Of course it's politically motivated. But the stupid thing with the Pheua Thai is you knew you had a target on your back. You knew that they don't want you to be in power. Are you just not smart enough to understand and see that? And don't do stupid things, like selling rice to a friend who then sold it to another friend, and none of them were Chinese. That answered that question.
Well, there was two very divergent views. Konanitin, do you have anything to say about the charge against Kun Yingluck?
Yeah. First, I have to bring you back to the fact that Kun Yingluck hasn't been read of her verdict. So nobody here can say that the charge of her is fair or unfair. But her colleagues, like Kun Tom has just mentioned, were charged with the different charges, different article. Obviously, Minister Bun Song and the team has been charged with corruption, and under Article 157, and Kun Yingluck has been charged with negligence and ignorance. So the penalty is different. Actually, if I'm not, please do not refer to this as a fact, but I was told by lawyers and by senior judges that I know that Kun Yingluck's sentence, if she would ever serve, has maximum of only 10 years. Could not be like 40, 50 years or life imprisonment. And normally, again, I was told that normally any defendant will not be charged with maximum extent of penalty. I would say that until September 27th, then maybe for another round, it could be. Then we can say with our own opinion, because in Thailand there's still a charge that if you ever insult or make any comments on the verdict, you could be brought to trial as well. But this verdict has been read from the Supreme Court on her colleagues, so we can say that they were found guilty and they had been charged and sentenced. Every government of Thailand, I would say since Ayutthaya dynasty, has always helped farmers. Agriculture, farmers. For the Thai people, we were taught in high school that they are the backbone of a country. There's no doubt. The most important sector for every government, and I would say the most voters are farmers, not businessmen like us. We are minority. So all the focus, all the aids or subsidies have to focus to the farmers first. But has anybody ever complained about subsidizing farmers? Never. No. The policy to aid farmer is a legitimate policy. You don't help people that who you would help. From the gentleman who raised this question, even EU in the developed country, they still help farmers. That is no doubt. But the policy to help farmers was there. It was a correct policy, but it was badly implemented. You trying to twist the wordings in the policy. When you say help the farmer, in all fairness, we should all understand that you cannot help by guaranteeing a profit. What you could help to the most extent is make sure that they haven't torn their pocket. You could not help farmer with the cost of production of 6,000 baht a ton of rice with an avowal of 15,000 baht a ton. So this is, to me, the first mistake. You could help, but it has to be reasonable help. Then I'm in the construction business. I lost drastically on Phuket International Airport. Nobody helped me. I lost almost 800 million baht on that project. They still want to apply more liquidated damage on that contract. I might have been blacklisted because I could not finish in time. I had to fight for proof that all the delays have been caused not only by the construction company, but there has been changes in the drawing and in the designs. Anyone wanted to help me? I hired 30,000 people too. So
we all take a collection for Kunuchin now.
At least we know why Phuket Airport's such a mess then.
So in all fairness, I would be pleased if you would offer, 8,000, 9,000, have enough pennies to not to be a burden of the big societies. And I will never pledge, I will never take pledge on every seed of rice. Every seed of rice means what? No ceiling. Whatever you can produce, come, I take. So the fundamental or the big, the way to implement the policy cannot be deemed with anything else. And it has proven, you read the verdicts, it has proven that who is behind the scene? The merchants, the rice merchants, who has always been accused and charged in the past recent governments. The guy sold the rice, and then the guy had another smelly case in it's called Ua Athon house, how you call, the cheap house for the people. It's the same, today he sells rice, another day he sells a poor home. How could it be the same guy? Low income home. At least if you want to take money, take from the rich, not from the poor. No excuse in my sense. I have great respect of many friends on Pheua Thai party, but not on this case. I have to say, when you pledge every seed of rice, I'm sure there are many people in that government that graduated with economic degree, degree of economics. Demand, supply. When you don't put any cap on the tonnage per household, everybody went home and grew rice. I lost a third of my workforce, and I had no reason to pull them because they said, boss, I'm here working 200 baht a day with an overtime of another 120 baht a day. In my life, I would never be able to find this auspicious opportunity that I have a cost of 6,000 baht. And someone is buying at 15,000. I know that, there will be cut for dumping, but I still will gain about 10,000. Which is more than 50% margin. I'm working with you, 8 days a week. What do I have? Workers. So I had no reason to pull them. So once they went back, what happened? The production of rice quadrupled. Because the distribution of Thai household is, the first child, the eldest son, is actually, a big knuckling, doesn't really go to school, and, like to fight. So he stay home and, raise bulls and, do all the rice. The second son, who is a bit more civilian, get a certain kind of education, then they go to big city and work. The third son probably have a kind of mini degree from engineering school then you go to work in the corporate. So that there is already a balanced distribution of the Thai household. Once every seed of rice is pledged, it's off balance because everyone goes back and wanted to be farmers, with almost triple, the income above the cost. So this is why the Anti-Corruption Office, the National Auditing Office, the Attorney General Office issued statements to the government that please do not pursue this policy, or you need to amend the policy. And this is why, if Kun Yingluck, if she should have paid more attention on this, she might not have to face today.
Thank you, Kunaratin.
So I think this, if you ask me whether it's corruption or not, for the first verdict, I said yes. And with the sentence, I said too small.
Julian.
Julian Spindler. I'm surprised not to hear more a sense of crisis from the panel this evening. It seems to me that Thailand is going down a cul-de-sac at high speed, and there are no obvious exit points. It seems the idea that we're going to live with a military-dominated, military-controlled country for the foreseeable future, people are talking about 5 to 10 years, because it's certainly true today that the military has a tighter grip on every aspect of this country than at any time since I arrived here in 1969. And probably it's true to say that it has a more complete control of the country than at any time in Thailand's modern history, because I have never seen an organization that can reach into the farthest corners of the country in the way that this current military can do. And that's very surprising, because it shows a level of organization in the Thai military that one didn't actually expect. So a number of issues, the Thaksin brand has been hit and hit and hit, and it comes back each time. It came back each time because he gave the poor people of Thailand a taste of what the ballot box could deliver in beneficial terms for their life. Universal health care, increase in daily minimum wage to 300 baht, village development fund, even OTOP. The poor people of Isan are not going to give up the possibility of getting those benefits back. So I'd like to ask the panel, how do they think that this issue, this potential confrontation is going to be resolved?
Okay. Kunkasa, we'll start with you again.
Don't underestimate me. Okay, don't underestimate me. Yeah, don't. And I think things look seemingly quite normal on the surface. I think for two reasons. One, the royal funeral, and second, the coronation. And I think we have the civility of not to make any political moves because of these two very important events. But after that, it's a different ball game altogether. That's one point. Second, I have proposed in the informal working dinner with the Pheua Thai, and I think even Kun Anutin was present at times, and one or two other parties, that we professional political parties and politicians must somehow and somewhere sit down together and talk. And if we were all to be democratic in our belief and objectives, then we should work together to prevent any non-elected personality to become the next Prime Minister of Thailand after the national elections. That is an offer across the table to the Pheua Thai, Kun Anutin and the rest, and so on, to the Chat Patana, Kun Top, Kun Banhan's elder son. That was said openly. So that's one. Third is that I think there is a movement in Malaysia called Invoke. And if in Malaysia that could happen because of the disillusion with politics as is with conservatism running amok now in Malaysia with ethnic policy measures and so on, it will give room for a more progressive force to come on the forefront. I will not dispel that possibility in Thailand that there will be people getting together and move forward. And we have learned too many lessons that being on the street and so on, at the end of the day, we have a military government and then we have a vested interest type of government and so on. I think we have gone this into circle for the past 85 years, and it's about time that we get out of this circle of negative political happenings. And I remain optimistic, and they will definitely be part and parcel of that transformation of Thailand, so be a bit patient.
Tom, do you want to be a bit more pessimistic than you were last time?
I think I said it. I think there's a lull before the storm. This could be either good or bad. You have to understand that, as Kun Kasit said, the good thing about Thailand is we do have civility. And there is certain things that we will hold off on until we see what the future in that case abides. I also said that my bad scenarios, Kun Thaksin decides not to stay low. And as he comes back, it's the brand, right? Mawan said that it's the brand. There is no Pheua Thai when there is no Thaksin. I think that's a fallacy. I see all of these Pheua Thai politicians say, we're going to reform the party. Great, who's going to pay for it? Right? Where's the brand? Right? The Pheua Thai are all together just because they believe in him. So it's really up to him, right? I don't think we're sitting here saying that Thailand is going to all get together and kumbaya down the road. Of course there's going to be conflicts. But I read the polls. Every Monday, Pheua Thai gets a poll, right? Poll sheet. I see it. You know, sometimes I'm able to look at it, and it's stunning. Right? 48% of the populace thinks the economy is bad. 48%. In most countries, that should drive out the government, right? But the funny thing is, 76% thinks that the country is stable and there's less corruption. And the funny thing is, 82% thinks Prayut is doing a great job because he does those two things, right? I actually hope, look, you know, I come from America. I lived there for a very long time. I actually served under President Clinton. I believe in the world's, you know, the whole Western democracy idea. But if you look at even America or anywhere, you know, you said the word I love, nakling, right? Countries are electing thugs to run their countries. Are you telling me that there's much difference between Donald Trump and Prayut? They all kind of look the same, actually. They talk the same. Look at Duterte. Shoot. His pulled up, shoot. I shouldn't say shoot Duterte, should I? Don't, that was wrong. That was a pun. I don't think it's a Thai issue. I really don't. I think you got to look around the world. I think democracy, as the way we saw it, where the populace actually gets involved, is dying. I think the world wants a strong man. The world likes people who can solve. Donald Trump always said, I will fix your problem. Didn't say anybody else would. I would fix your problem. And that's what Prayut is saying. And that's what Thaksin had said. Right? I don't think Thailand's any different. Right? I think your question was, do we not have concerns? Like I said, my only concern is, right, people don't come out on the streets, I think there's a misconception from the foreign press, thinking that a bunch of people from Isan get together and go, let's go out to the streets and have fun. Or a bunch of Bangkok people, Bangkok maybe because they really have nothing to do except go to the malls. So they'll go out on the streets. Are you seriously telling me these people aren't paid to go on the streets? Depends on whether or not Thaksin wants to pay these people to come back out. Whether or not there's, I'll tell you one other thing that I think Thailand don't have anymore. We don't have a Sonti Lim Thongkun anymore. We don't have a Jatuporn. We don't have a Natawut. We don't have a, well, we still have Suthep. Well, anyway. Sorry, sir, I apologize. Deep apologies. And when you don't have these people speaking out on behalf, we're sheeps. We're sheeps, okay? And you have to have these people who come out and do that. I think people are just tired. Am I concerned? I'm only concerned about one thing, is how Thaksin after, and he says it very well, after the civility goes away, will he come back with a vengeance? Or will he just let things go? If it is, then you're going to have a... Look, when Prayut first took office, I actually said, wow, we gone back to the military? Then I kind of asked myself, when were we not kind of have a military? They were hiding behind elected officials, but are you telling me military wasn't there? And always remember, guys, ladies, I'm sorry, gentlemen, we have a very special country. We can't actually talk about something that should be talked about. And as long as you can't, if you have cancer and you get always diagnosed with a heart problem, you're going to, so what do? You may never get any better, but you maintain so that you don't die. And this is the country we live in. We're never going to be, I love when people say to me, how come you're not Japan? How come you're not Korea? How come you're not Singapore? And I say, well, shit, I'm not Burma. And I'm not Vietnam, and I'm not Laos, and I'm certainly not Cambodia. So that's me, that's Thailand, right? So that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, to give an analogy to Julian's observations, clearly, I mean, the regime is like an anaconda that is struggling, that is stifling out any political life out of the country. There is a space for political life, and that is conditioned by essentially who they want, and these are their allies. Because this year, for instance, there have been rather dramatic anti-military government protests, but these were from the yellow shirt camp, whether it was a coal-fired plant in the south, opposition to the regime's attempt to reform the universal health care, protests against the amendment of the Petroleum Act. But those are sort of people that the regime tolerates, but essentially they have crippled the political life out of the country, and they are controlling all the political institutions. I have to agree with him. I mean, maybe the Thais are going to trade off electoral democracy for peace on the streets, and I think that's the regime's calling card, is as long as the streets are clean and quiet and peaceful, they're okay. And they can do that because they enjoy the monopoly of violence, as all armies do and all states do. They have boots and bullets to ensure that that doesn't happen. But how long the Thais can tolerate that is a question that we don't know, and that's the exciting part of covering the country. But the existential reality of the Thailand's troubles still remain. 3.5 years later, nothing has changed. The fault lines are very much there. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I'll take 2 more questions. So your question, please. Could you identify yourself too, please?
I don't really work for anyone, though.
Doesn't matter. Just give us your name, that's fine.
Get a job.
I just graduated high school. Chat Satien Thai, I'm just a student tagging along. I'd like to ask the panel's opinion. We've been told that the current government has basically laid down policy for the next 10 years at least. Does that mean that there may be potential for a government stalemate in the future, as an elected lower house may be in conflict with an unelected upper house which is trying to stick with a policy that the lower house has not set?
I think, Kun Anutin, you may well find yourself in that position of being in a government where you're in conflict with the military. How are you going to manage it?
Being held responsible for policies that you haven't set and have no say in setting.
My question, my response is as what I said. It's what is your proposal? What is the government's proposal to the parliament? And what's the intention of doing that? If it's good deed, how could it be a problem? You know, lower house, upper house. Once Article 44 is no longer there, people from the lower house will always say, I was elected by the people. You were not. It makes difference.
Won't that be a conflict, though? When you find yourself in conflict with this military-appointed supreme body?
No. If I ever made my way back to the house again, let's be realistic. If I ever propose the similar rice scheme again, then I will really have problems. Yes. Not only with the upper house, but probably amongst my fellow MPs. This is what you are presenting. It's the content that you're presenting. The lower house, I would always say have better privilege because they can always claim that they are elected by the people. And again, once, I think I answered dual question. Why people are quiet, as Excellency Kasit just mentioned it. We have to be respectful on the two important events that will, shortly take place, and that made people quiet. It shows that people still regard the monarchy as our supremacy, which, if you are not Thai, you will never know. Sorry to say that. After that, the leader has always said, it's even in the song, we will keep our promise, and it won't take long. 4.5 years, if it ever passes, and someone else step out and say, let's give me another 4 years because I haven't been able to solve the problems. Do you think that can happen? Practically, it can never happen. So a politician like me will never worry about that. And why do I have to go out and demand election now? Because every main body in NCPO always mention that we will still follow the roadmap. No, regardless of how many songs they have written lately, but the roadmap is still there. And if they ever wanted to prolong, which I don't think they can, with my own calculation, I could be wrong, but I never reserve a chance that election will not be held, I would say within the upcoming 18, maximum 24 months. I don't see a single chance that election cannot be held. So that's why we just, wait until the fat lady sings. That's what we are doing. Yeah.
Kun Kasit, maybe I could ask you as a former minister, how you envisage government working when you've got a supreme body that dictates a large part of policy.
I agree with Kun Anutin that once we are elected, we have the legitimacy, and that is our strength to tell to the people that what the military junta has put into the constitution, into the organic laws, into the workings and the findings of the strategic committee or the reform committee would not be legitimate or valid. So that's the legitimacy that we would have. Second, if I were the leader of a political party, and now I'm proposing to Kun Anutin indirectly, is to campaign for the complete amendment of the existing constitution, which I voted against. I said it publicly. I said that this constitution is undemocratic and it is a drawback on the democratization process of Thailand. And that's not acceptable, and so on. So I don't think there is any legitimacy to the constitution itself in spite of the passing of the referendum and so on. But why not we can propose a new referendum to the amendment of the constitution and move forward in the decentralization and participation processes of democracy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can we have the next question, please?
Yes. Hello. My name is Cham and I am an activist. I have only one question for Mr. Kasit. Just an hour ago, I just came back from Ratchabasong intersection, and there are a lot of red shirts protesters there. They are very angry and very sad that today the case of Mr. Apisit and Mr. Suthep was thrown out for the court, so no one is responsible for the death on 2010. So with the feeling of injustice between the red and the yellow, I want to ask you as one of the yellow shirt and one of the Democrat Party members, how can we move forward to reconciliation? Thank you.
I have gone through so many cases, and on the 14th of September I have to go to the court for my presence at the Suvarnabhumi airport, and I would have accepted the decision of the courts in favor or not in favor. And I never would not have a dreamt or even to say publicly or in privately that the court was impartial. I think one has to accept, because if we were to be a rule of law abiding society, one have to accept the outcome. I could not have imagined how I was charged just being at the airport for 45 minutes and to be a terrorist, and the penalty is death and so on. I mean, I could not have understood how the police and the office of the Attorney General were able to accuse me on that account of the fact that I was expressing my opinion as a citizen of Thailand and so on. So you cannot say that because one decision was in favor of Kun Apisit and one was not, then the court was lenient. And I think Kun Apisit and Kun Suthep never had the attempt to pay the judge's office of the Attorney General or the police. But there are so many cases where money was on display within the vicinity of the institution of justice of Thailand. I think it was in newspaper for so long. Thank you.
Well, I was going to just, Kun Kasit, I was just going to say, do you accept that there are problems with confidence in the justice system in Thailand, that people do doubt its impartiality?
I think I cannot have that lack of confidence. I have to, as a political player, as a citizen in a democratic society, the rule of law is very important. I cannot make judgment because some cases might be negative, some cases might be positive. We play by the rule of the game.
Tom.
Jonathan Mad, Nong, let me tell you this. I don't like Kun Apisit, I'll be upfront. Right? I think Kun Suthep is a jerk. Right? But to say that the courts rendered a bad decision today because 90 people's lives were lost, and that these two people should be held accountable for it while they were running the government, and you had protesters on the street, and an action was taken to clear the protesters, much like Kun Somchai, Tan Chawalit, was cleared in a case a few months ago. When you're a government, your ability to rule is based upon trying to keep stability within the country. I want to be fair on both sides, because I know if you want to bring reconciliation back, it has to start with people like you. And that has to start with the understanding that not everything is perfect, but if we're all so skeptical, and we're all seem to be so jaded by everything that happens that doesn't take our side of the story, we're never going to move forward. A government has the right to stand its ground and protect the country from protesters. Do I agree with what the yellows did? Of course not. Do I agree with what the reds did? Of course not. But if we stand here and question every decision of the courts that doesn't go our way, we can't move forward. Right? I have a friend who's currently sitting in jail now that I'm very sad for, Kun Sorayut. Right? The court made a decision, the guy's in jail. Done. And hopefully he'll get out. But if you ask me, where does reconciliation start? It's to stop being so skeptical about everything. I know we don't live in a perfect world, but we can't also hate everything that doesn't go our way. And I think that's the problem with Thailand, right? We take so many sides on so many things. I can dislike a Pisit. I don't have, to say that every decision he made was wrong. Those lives are lost. Sad. But those lives were lost because they decided to come and protest on the streets, blocked our way of life, hurt our businesses, and for whatever reason, in the US, they would have shot everybody. Do you think the National Guard would allow these people to be on and by the way, the yellows too? I think the problem with Thailand is it doesn't only be with the courts. I appreciate I love what you said. My name is, what's your name? Cham. And I'm an activist. Thank you. And I wish there was more like you. How old are you?
35.
25?
35.
35, okay, well you're too old. I wish there were more younger versions of you. Keep it up. Be an activist, but be a fair activist. Don't be a hateful activist. Okay, that would be my point. And that's how you can end up having reconciliation. Okay, Champ?
Thanks very much. I'm going to call it a day there because our speakers have been speaking for a very long time.
I have to go to the bathroom.
And that too.
Seriously.
All that water. But thanks very much to our 4 panelists, and thank all of you for coming as well. Come again to the club.
Good fun.